Good evening and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haynes of Sky High and Fly Jump Lab. And tonight we are going to have a treat. We're going to talk to Coach Stone, who I met again on Instagram. And we are just going to talk track and field and training. And we're going to find out about him and where he is and what he coaches and what he does. We're in the field of track and field. And season's starting to get hot. We just had a big meet out here last weekend at the Arcadia Winter Championships, which is a growing monster. It's been around for a while, but in the last few years, it's really started to pick up some steam. All right.
Troy, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Much better than the first time we planned to do this.
Oh yeah. Well, you were dying of something exotic, right?
We had the flu going ripping through my house and my team, so it was a rough 2 weeks there for everybody involved.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's making its way across the nation, right? UCLA's basketball team just went through a
No way.
They had it. Yeah, they had the flu the other night when they played and beat. I think it was the Michigan State game. Maybe it's Penn State. I think they beat Michigan State when they were healthy, and then they were kind of battling it a little bit. Because I remember I was yelling at the screen as
Yeah.
I often do, and both my wife and my mom both say, they can't hear you, and I'm like, why aren't we playing Mara? Our seven
Yeah, yeah.
center. And he's been playing really well recently. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? How come he didn't even play hardly in the first half? And it comes out later that he was, really struggling against the flu. So yeah, it's not epidemic level, but it has made its way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. I had a handful of kids out the last two meets just for being sick. So,
Yeah.
you know, part of it's that time of year. So
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunate, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
always something. If it isn't, last year we had a rash of weather here on the coast on meet days. It was like
Really?
during the week, it would be fine. It would be, you could see clouds and this and that, but it's Southern
Yeah.
California. So you'd see the clouds, you go, it's not gonna rain. And then on Saturday, for like it seemed like clockwork every time, it's just like cold and rainy and drizzly and just ugh. I was like,
Oh man.
I would rather have it go the other way.
Yeah, yeah.
High jumpers
Yeah.
always like to have the days off and then just compete.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Fresh legs.
100%.
Always fresh
That's
legs. So
yep.
hey, coach, to fill
Yeah.
me in now. We cross paths on Instagram, which is the
Yeah.
running joke of the show. 95% of my guests are from Instagram. Either I
Okay.
watched your posts, I watched some of your kids doing things, and I was like, wow, this is really great. And then we chatted up a little bit, and
Yeah.
so everybody's anxious to hear about you and your program. So where are you, and what are you coaching?
Yeah, I'm at Elmhurst University. So we're 25 minutes straight west of Chicago. So
Okay,
if you're familiar, probably the most familiar track and field lore of Elmhurst is York High School and the Long Green Line. They're located here as well. So
okay,
big documentary about them. But yeah, so
awesome.
that's where we're at.
Okay. I have one client that I've been working with. You may have seen him on Instagram. Jordan Randall,
Yeah.
young man, just jumped 7'2" and a quarter. So
Goodness.
him and his dad, have been just really working hard, and he's only 5'8", so he's
Wow.
really fast, tremendous flexibility.
Okay.
And from what I'm able to gather, he's got to be really coachable because, dad came to me and asked me early what I thought. And I was like, wow, he does so many things well. He was already jumping, I think, at least 6'4", 6'6" when they came to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had already been jumping indoors. And he said, what do you think? And I was like, well, if you really want him to get a jump higher heights, move him farther away from the bar.
Yeah.
And they really did it. And you could really see just literally every post. It was like, he moved him farther out, and I said I'd like him to get his hands up higher, because he's really short, so he's going to have to get as much lifted takeoff as he can.
Yep.
Started doing that, and then he started, driving his knee across and leaving it up, and he's just done. If I had a checklist, which I kind of did when I did the analysis for him, I
Yeah.
said that, and that was the first year, and he's
Wow.
every time, and I'm just I feel like what a consultant, it's like
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not implementing. That's usually I get to do a little bit of both, because
Yeah,
I'm seeing at practice and I'm doing the drills, and I just have made some very specific, but yet, broad statements like he needs to be able to do this. And James is his dad is the one that's implementing. And man, he's just gotten better every year. He won
that's awesome.
first year, he came in second, I think, at both, either second or third indoor and out.
Okay.
Then last year he won indoor and came in second out. And then this year they're just now coming up to that run again. But he's got to be
Yeah.
one. If he's not the national leader, he's got to be close, because 7.225 is up there.
Yeah, I got to imagine, especially this early in the season, you don't have a whole lot of guys jumping 7 feet yet.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
gosh,
that is
five
really,
eight.
really good. I know, right? And he's really
What's the
fast. Um,
what's the record for head over height? Do you know?
oh yeah, yeah, that's a great topic. We've just been talking about this recently. I'm thinking about doing one of my rants on a podcast about it. Like it would be really interesting to me to have the argument of who is the better high jumper, the one who jumps really high or the one who jumps higher over his head. So
Yeah.
the record is held currently by these two athletes who are both very well known. The first was Franklin Jacobs,
Okay.
who was an American, and I want to say somewhere in Philadelphia, and forgive
Okay.
me for not knowing better. But he was 5'7" and 3/4, and he jumped 7'7" and 3/4. So
Goodness.
two
Okay.
feet over his head.
Yeah,
And the great Stefan Holm from Sweden was 5'11" and a half and jumped 7'11" and a half.
that's right. I forgot about Stephen Holm.
Yeah.
Which shame on me, but I was like, I forgot that he's short because he jumps
Right.
so high.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
he's not technically that short, but yeah, for the guys that we watch a lot, he's short.
Yeah.
Like Kerr last year, 6'7".
Yeah.
Mogenberg, who won it back in '84, was 6'8".
Yeah.
Derek Druin, one from Canada, 2016. He's 6'5". I don't know how tall Barshim is. I've heard 6'4".
Okay.
Perfect body type for 6'4". He looks like he weighs 100 pounds if he's
Oh
dripping.
my God. Yes.
He's fast and he's light and he's flexible, right? I tell
Yeah.
some kids that I'm like, hey, you've got the magic checklist going here. Okay.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
really tall, you're really fast, you're pretty coordinated for someone who's tall, you're not gangly, and you got good flexibility or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are the two. So
Okay.
yeah, the argument is, it would be interesting to line up all the greats and say who actually jumped the highest over their own heads, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Who left the ground the most?
Yeah.
I think my coaching record is we had a 5'3". He claimed 5'4", but he was 5'3", who jumped 6'4". Um,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
A foot is good.
So
I remember I was as a young kid, I don't think right away, but relatively quickly I was jumping whatever my height was. I don't think when I
okay.
was 12, but I remember when I was 13, I was 5 feet tall. I jumped 5'1", and then I was, so grade by
Gotcha.
grade, I remember jumping just a little bit over my
Yeah.
head. As a senior in high school, I was 6'3", I jumped 6'8", or 6'10" and 3/4 my senior year. Then
Okay.
at UCLA, once I stopped growing, I think I went up to 7'3" and a half. So that was basically at foot. So I respect anybody that can jump over their own head. And then obviously
Yeah.
2 feet is
Yeah. That's wild.
um, absolutely. So how long have you been in the coaching game out there?
Yeah. I just had this conversation actually. So this is year 17 for me.
Okay.
Started right out of college, coaching cross country at the high school level, and then I coached track at my alma mater for high school as well, back in '08, and did 8 years at the high school level, and then moved up to collegiate right around the time my daughter was born, and said it's time to either get out of the game or make a salary at this. So,
Right.
um,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
so
Because
that was
yeah,
the
you can't
move.
make any money in high school for sure.
Not if
Unless
you're not teaching.
Yeah, I mean, if you're teaching,
Yeah.
sure, and then it's a stipend, right? But
Yeah.
and maybe if you're fortunate enough to coach at a big pocket school, like a
Yes.
private school, right, with a decent bit of money coming in, good football and basketball programs, right? Because
Yep.
it's always a trickle down effect. Because another long held thing on the show, an opinion that leaks out of me from time to time, is that track and field is just the hardest of all the sports. It seems to me if we're not at the bottom, we got to be real close.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, making money at this sport. I remember my roommate, shout out to Dwayne Washington, the triple jumper at UCLA.
Okay.
He was my teammate and roommate my freshman year. We both went to the same high school,
Nice.
and we hardly ever saw each other. It was classic. Like, other than both being on the track team, he had a buddy named Shane Mack, who was a great baseball player, played for the Twins, and he was on the U.S. Olympic team in '84, a gold medalist. Another great athlete. They would just ran together all the time. They were like Mutt and Jeff. They just had laughed and had fun. And I don't know if they ever went to class. I'm sure they did. You know, I'm
Nice.
not saying they didn't. But
Yeah.
I never saw I never saw any of the athletes other than at practice. So, you know,
Okay.
there's only a precious few athletes that were in the same classes in kinesiology. So, yeah, I don't know if anybody ever went to class, but we were definitely there at workout and all that. So,
Yeah.
what was the point I was talking about? Oh, Dwayne
Making
and
money and track.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we would stay up at night when we did finally cross paths. We're both in the room getting ready to go to sleep and would just, you know, toss around those dreams of Olympic glory and, you know, being on a Wheaties box. And, you know, I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, look at Bruce Jenner, you know, look at that guy. He's a stud. He's on the Wheaties box, you know, and that's got to be the way to go. And, you know, it only took a few years to lose that idea, become very disillusioned with it all because I just knew too many athletes that, you know, were really good, were way better than I was
Yeah.
going to be, and they weren't making any money at it either, you know. And
Yeah.
there was a little period there in the 80s where you could travel, you could go to Europe and make some money. And
Yeah.
you know, if you're good, you jump 7.3 or 7.5 or something like that. And then if you were close to breaking records, Jimmy Howard was one of the ones I remember. He was always traveling around and jumping. He jumped 7.7 in LA. He took a jet, go to New York and jump 7.8, you know, and they were just cha-ching, cha-ching, you know. But those
Yeah.
are gone. Like it now it's
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
they don't pay, you know, the jumpers. I've had Jeremy Fisher on and we talked for a while
I
about,
listened to that. Yeah.
yeah, you know, he's like, hey, you got if you're not breaking a world record, they're not giving you anything
Yeah. Yeah.
for the jumpers. And it's kind of maybe Mondo, you know, to
Yeah.
playing. He's going to break his world record. He's smart. He does it by a centimeter each time, you know, so he can rake in, you know,
Yep.
some more money. So
Well, that was how Bubka did it too. One
yeah,
centimeter at a time because he got a bonus every time.
absolutely. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
smart. Yeah.
Yep.
The Russians were really smart at that too. There's another great one, not related to track and field, but the great Vasily Alexiev, the weightlifter.
Yeah.
I was a kid, you know, watched him on Wild World of Sports. He used to be on the cover. They used to show him, you know, on one of the opening. You know, you'd see him, boom, you know, 550 pounds overhead, you know, and
Yeah.
everybody's like, look at that big fat guy, you know.
Yeah.
But he literally was the same way. I don't know what the smallest increment you could break a world record by in that particular field. I want to
Yeah.
say a kilogram, but he literally was going up whatever the smallest was. And if you look him up on the list, he broke his own world record like over 70 times.
Good Lord. Yeah.
It was like he was really, really good at it. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's an art form. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But it's a business move too at
sure.
that point, you
Oh yeah.
know?
Yeah. But imagine being at that level where you could just confidently go, I'll just, you know, instead of maxing it out this one time while I'm
Yeah.
young, you know, whatever, and just really stick it out there, you know, where nobody's ever going to get it. I'll just keep, you know, plugging away. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, how do you guys stack up now? You're in college after, so you made the long-awaited jump, kind of what we'd say to the pros.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, this is another interesting topic. We've gone down this road a few times, but yeah, I did the high school thing for a long time. My first 6 years were all junior college.
Okay.
Then I went and got a real job teaching. So then I did the high school thing and just disappeared off the face of the map. Like I didn't pay attention to collegiate stuff anymore. I didn't really watch the worlds. I was just kind of, you know, and the Olympics would come around and I'd watch a little bit, but I was out of touch completely. I kept coaching, kept working on my
Yeah.
craft, but not at a super high level. I mean, my kids did well and blah blah blah, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't the same kind of drive. So I sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I would have had it in mind as a career before I
Yeah.
actually embarked on it, because it's turned into a side career, you know,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
being a teacher. for all those years. So, what's it like having made the jump to the big leagues and doing it for a real living?
Real different. So early on it was I was coaching at a high school, just private high school, in Naperville and working at a shoe store, to
Right.
pay my bills. So I was in grad school, working at a shoe store and coaching at the same time.
Hmm.
And kind of between those things, we could cobble together, rent and,
Yeah.
sometimes you get to go out to eat. Every now and then I'd be able to pay my like insurance on time.
Right.
Um, so it was, but I think there was at that time, I had I'm always checking the job boards and looking for jobs and had well, I'm only applying to the P4, well, P5 at the time. I'm only applying to P5s. Like that's where I belong. A couple years into my first coaching gig at the high school level, I was like, oh man, head coaching is super different than I thought it was.
Right.
So I had a lot to learn. So I ended up spending a long time. I had a great mentor there. One of my dearest friends, one of, I think, the most genuine coaches I've worked with, who mentored me a lot and kind of taught me a lot about working with young men. Because that was all I coached was young men. And that became kind of the foundation of my coaching. And I think I was really lucky to have had that opportunity to work with him first
Hmm.
because he started it from a position of, it was a small private Catholic school, really faith-based. And he started from a place of like, we are living a righteous life here. And, running is part of that. And how do we express that? And how
Right.
does running fit into that? Um, he's super successful. I think he just finished his 25th consecutive conference championship in cross
Wow.
country, had the state champ at their class level. Um, so he had a great season. He's been very successful, but he's just never started from a place of how do we win. He's always started from a place of how do we have a culture that breeds winning.
Right.
Um, then making that move up to the university level was really different. So I moved into a university um, nearby and was just at first just a volunteer assistant, so making zero money.
Right.
And from there was just kind of working on like the biomechanics of sprinters. Wasn't working with jumpers, was just helping out sprinters and hurdlers at the time.
Hmm.
And the coach there was setting all the workouts, planning the periodization, and I was really there just to kind of make sure they weren't going to hurt themselves.
Right.
Um, that grew a little bit. He got a little more faith in me. That grew. I got paid the next year, and then took a leap. Went through a coaching change at that university. Started exploring opportunities, and Elmhurst came up as an opportunity. Um, of the three job offers I had, it was the lowest, but lowest salary. But the track program prior to me getting there had 7 women in it total.
Right.
And so the coach was young. Coach Bartolozzi, he's my boss now. He's young, and he tells me, "I'm going to give you autonomy. I got a handful of girls you can coach, and you're going to be the sprints, jumps, and hurdles coach here." Um, so my wife said, "I'll give you 2 years."
Hmm.
So I got a job working at a warehouse to pay the bills still. My wife, I got married in the meantime. And my wife said, you can have 2 years. If we can't make this a full-time gig in 2 years, you got to go find something else. Because we can't
Right.
scrape by this way for too long. Uh, that first year, we had a great time. Things went really, really well. The team grew a lot and I ended up getting a job offer for a full-time gig to stay at Elmhurst right after that. So, that created a sense of stability that was really useful. Um, but I think that really unique opportunity of stepping into a brand new, kind of a program that was down to just the bare bones, 7 athletes who were cross country runners. And then I had my first year there, we had recruited enough that we had 15 women total, almost all of them freshmen,
Right.
none of them elite. Um, and I got the chance to take everything I learned at the high school level and say, we get to pick the culture, we get to pick what this team is going to be like. Um, and kind of moving ahead with that. It worked out, and it's just been this great chance where as we've gotten better, the raises have come. I was able to get a couple
Right.
job offers that helped me negotiate some better salaries. And I think having that chance to be like, all right, when I come home, I get to be with my family and I get to sit and think about track, not
Right.
go work in a warehouse driving a forklift around or moving boxes around or catching up on work that I didn't do throughout the day. So, I think it's been kind of an exponential growth,
Mm-hmm.
once that happened. So once I made that leap into the full-time coaching gig, it was, it's nice. But I think there's a yin to that yang.
Right.
Where it's also like, yeah, the thing I love, the hobby that was so special to me and the sport I love is now my livelihood.
Yeah.
So the thing you love suddenly is a job.
Yeah.
And there is a little bit of like, oh man, a little bit of pressure with that, but also turning I think it took me a little bit to understand, you know, you can't turn it into the job. It's just got to continue to be the passion and the thing you
Yeah.
love. Um, and the job will stay there,
Yeah.
as opposed to showing up every day and kind of slugging through the work and being like, oh, got to punch
Right.
in and punch out. And um, so it was an interesting, kind of interesting transformation to go from, I thought, the day I got that first salary, like, this is it. I'm done. I'm on my way. And all of a sudden there were these new challenges of looking at the sport completely differently. I'm looking at this job differently. And, you know, I had to kind of go back and find that position of like starting from a place of like, I love this sport. Like I need to coach it like I love it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think, yeah,
yeah. Oh, I was gonna say that's that old saying, right? If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Kind of like that.
yeah. And yeah, that was the idea is I thought that was just how it was going to be. Um, I thought it was going to be like, yeah, I already love it. It's not going to be work. And then you find out like, well, there's a lot of there's
Yeah.
paperwork, there's
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
recruiting,
That's
there's
different though too. It's not really coaching, right? So yeah, learning how to be an
yeah,
administrator is that's one of
yep,
those things I continually have labored as the jumps coach or whatever. And I've only had two different head coaching gigs and a year of each. And both times I was just like, you know what? I'm just not that guy. The one that I really wanted to do that didn't pan out was to be the golf coach. My secret passion,
really,
golf coach. Yeah, because a friend of mine and I set it up, and they were like, "Well, you don't have a girls team," so we're like, "Yeah, we'll do a girls team." And we did the meetings and everything, and we got all set. We had a bunch of people that were interested, and I knew some guys that fitted clubs and got them great deals and this and that. And then at the very end, our lovely principal kind of jackknifed on us and picked somebody else to take the program, And I
man,
was just like, whoa. And I was going to do it for free. I didn't even care. I'm like, first
yeah,
I set it up. I go, we're going to be terrible. People are going to kill us for a while. But I'm like, it didn't matter because I know all of Southern California and all the schools that I picked had really nice courses. So I figured if nothing,
yeah,
I'm going to get 9 holes, at these really nice courses. And when I signed up and I had a short period of time. So it was one of those times I really felt like, man, this all just kind of fell right into place. Like I got all the club deals, we got everything set, we got them in a local course. They gave us a great deal on balls, it was just everything was clicking. We started practicing, and then it was like setting up the meet schedule. That was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
and all these guys, these coaches would love to take you and just kill you because it makes them
yeah,
look better. So that
yeah,
was setting up the meet schedule was great. I'm just like, yeah, I felt like one of those small, cool schools in college that, signs on to play Alabama, like a two
yeah, yeah,
school that, yeah, you'll beat us 73 to nothing, but you give us $500,000. That's
yeah,
what it
yeah.
kind of felt like, playing the 9 holes, but never really got to do it. So, but
Oh
yeah,
man,
the administrative end of that, only a couple different times, and yeah, I don't think I'm detail oriented enough. Like people that have watched me coach would probably say the opposite when it comes to my ideas on coaching. And my whole drive has been to find the best way to do all this stuff. So, my degree was in kinesiology, and I got a the master's degree in exercise science. And, I'm always studying and reading and watching, and, coaches like yourself on Instagram, I see a drill or, a philosophy come out or whatever, I
Yeah.
listened to Tony Holler on,
Yeah.
on Instagram, and had him on for a great podcast. And I was just like, wow, this is, not only is it a little bit different, but I go, this just goes right with what I've always been thinking, which is that, most of the time it seems to me like we're overtrained.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
was just feeding right into that with me. I'm like, oh yeah, I love this guy,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but
We
yeah,
we actually host the track football consortium at our school.
really
Yeah. So the
awesome.
Chicago one comes to Elmhurst. So
Awesome.
he's on
Yeah.
our campus every year.
Oh man, talk about, he has got to be just loving life. I think, if he didn't love track so much, I think he could, and I know he has. I think he's told a story where he has started consulting with the great football players that want to, get their 40 times down for the combine.
Yeah.
Because you think about that, if you're a first round pick, the money is huge compared to even the second round.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
farther down the list you go, the less money you get, less guaranteed, less this, less that. But if you run a blistering time at the combine and you happen to already be a good player,
Yeah.
sometimes there's people that just run really fast. We're like, I don't even know what this guy can do, but he sure is fast. But then there's other guys who are like, the guy's got great hands and look at the speed. Holy, So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that's a great line of work to get in if you know what you're doing, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Because he's paired up with Les Spellman now too, who is
Mhm.
like one of the top combine guys
Yeah,
out there.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
smart. That's smart. Rebranding,
Yeah.
yourself to, that's something I would like to do. I see. It's weird because I love track, but all this explosive power, plyos, this, that, and the other thing, I look at it and it's like 9 out of 10 or more of the sports that we do are based on speed. I mean,
Yeah.
you can go power. It's almost like the great high jump, argument. Is it speed versus power?
Right.
But
Right.
power, I keep telling everybody, I go, yeah, power is a different thing. When you talk about it in high jump, I go, power is force times velocity.
Yep.
So you can have a ton of power and also be pretty fast. You know, and I always tell people, I go, if you have a certain amount of force that you can produce and you're running faster, your power number's going up. So
Yeah. Right. Right.
it's a real easy way to get your power numbers up, right? But from the lifting and the speed training and everything that comes along with that, it's just I my brain just goes, okay, soccer, football, basketball, tennis, anything
Yeah.
that involves explosive movements, volleyball, and you just go down the line. It's like there's so many sports that can utilize our skill set, and
Yeah.
but you gotta know everything that's going on there. You really can't have an unsuccessful client or someone who doesn't get a lot faster or or whatever. But I've known enough of the really good sprint coaches that the great John Smith at UCLA he was there when I was there, and he was took a bunch of freshmen that he recruited and turned them into gold medalists almost immediately. Danny Everett, Mike Marsh,
Yeah.
Steve
Okay.
Lewis. Steve Lewis was a freshman, I think, at UCLA in '88 when he won everything. Kevin Young I think he'd already graduated, but he won the 400 hurdles and set that mark that was, good for a long time. So I know John knows what he's doing. And,
Yeah.
you know, he helped me. I mean, I was a slow white guy. He got my 40 time down. So I was always impressed with that. And then, I work with another great coach. It'd be interesting to get you guys to meet Johnny Durazian at Vanguard University, who's a man of faith, also preaches and teaches, but was a great sprinter. And
Okay.
he routinely cranks out these awesome sprinters at Vanguard University, which was a small NAIA school, but is now, this year we've moved up to Division 2.
Oh wow.
So,
Nice.
yeah, big jump, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then the NC2A and all its wisdom makes you ineligible for your first year or two when you switch up a division. I always thought, okay, so we went from being big fish in a small pond So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
small fish in the big pond, but you're scared of this? Is that what you're saying? I was like,
Yeah,
come on,
that's
man.
I could see it going the other way. You know, if you go D2 to
Right.
D3 or D1 to D2, we'll sit you,
Sure.
but like that's wild to me.
Yeah.
Ah, all right.
The
Yeah.
infinite wisdom of the powers that be. Yeah, I find the NC2A just amazing, and also out here, CIF, and all their wisdom. CIF is the California Interscholastic Federation, and man, things have just gotten wild out here. They re-league and reset everything up like every couple of years. It's kind of like the big thing that's going on in the nation, where all your regional dynasties or your regional feel and your rivalries are going away,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
of releaguing, like the Pac-12, disbanding and becoming part
Right,
of the
right.
and then, it's like, okay, and they're trying to keep some of it alive. Like UCLA plays USC every year still, and we've already played Oregon and Washington. Okay, they're keeping those alive. We played Arizona this year in basketball, so that's still kind of alive, but it starts to lose its flavor, and it's like
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid growing up, all the bowl games were just regional. It was the big, the Rose Bowl,
Yeah.
Big Pac-10, and Cotton Bowl was SEC, and the big, the big, what was it, the Southeast Conference, what Texas and Oklahoma used to be in at that time, I think. And it's
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
then they went Big 12, and then, but anyway,
Yeah.
it's still evolving all the time. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of some of the, and sometimes it's just because they're trying to cover so much ground. I mean, California is a huge state. So
Right.
I should
Yeah.
probably keep my mouth shut and realize it's a lot harder than, it's easier to say, fix everything. So, so what is
Yeah, I
it
know.
for you guys this year now? Are you with you started off coaching just the men. It sounds like you switched over to being the women's coach. Now, are you back to
Yeah.
a bit of both, or what's going on?
Yeah, so I coached men at the high school level. Ended up right at the end there, started coaching some women too from um just an administrative, we couldn't keep a jumps coach. I was a distance coach at the time, couldn't keep a jumps coach. We were in a town that has, multi-time national champion cross country college down the street. I was like, you know what? I could walk down the street, find a guy who can coach distance runners for pretty cheap.
Right,
Even if it's just for one season at a time, I can keep a distance coach in here, but we needed continuity with the jumps and sprints. So I took over that, then took over the women too.
right.
When I moved up to the collegiate level, it was both genders. When I moved over to Elmhurst, it was just women. So we had a women's head coach, men's head coach, um, and then kind of two separate staffs. After my first year there, they decided they were going to move to a director of track and cross country, then combine the men's and women's programs. So now I coach men and women. So I have, I think our total team is like 95 men and women combined. Um, Under my umbrella as I'm associate head coach, and under my umbrella is the sprints, jumps, hurdles, and that's about 50 athletes total. And then I coach long, triple, high, and that's 22 total
Wow.
between both genders. So pretty big group, but distributed really evenly. So I'm pretty happy with how we were set up.
You cross over and do the multis as well?
I did. And then I was given one of the greatest gifts of we had a great multis coach in our conference who was the head coach at a rival school for a long time. Um, he stepped away and after a year off was like, I got to get back into coaching. We happened to geographically be the closest to him. And he was like, kind of that idea of going from director of a program, stepping away, and to get back in, he was going to end up being an assistant.
Right.
And that just is kind of one of those, you coached there for 30 years
Huh.
and you're going to work for a younger guy. And
Right.
are you going to be able to not say like that's not how we did it? So he came over and he just wants to continue coaching. So he coaches our multis now. So I did the multis for several years. But now I have, probably one of I think one of the best coaches who could do it. And Scott Bradley, he's just a legend in the area.
Yeah.
Um, Coaching our multis.
Awesome.
So that was, yeah, one of those like, I loved coaching it, but when a guy like that walks in and says, "This is what I'd like to do," you say, "All right, yeah,
Yeah.
that's your expertise." So I was happy to bring him on board. He's a great guy, great guy I'm learning a lot from. So
Yeah. Well, I find the multi is really interesting because the work ethic, I don't know if it's so funny. You can't tell. Like some people are definitely outliers, but like
yeah,
most people, I would say most pole vaulters are a little bit crazy, right?
yep, I agree.
Double tykes, right? And they're fast and they just have no fear. And they, and if they did, they kind of fell away from it early because you can't exist if you have fear in the pole vault.
Yep,
It's like so you see certain types that do well with that, and then the decathletes and heptathletes that I've met are very meticulous and organized and almost overworkers to a T. Like I've
yeah,
never met a decathlete yet that's like, I want to take 3 or 4 days off and just rest up. Even after they just had a big competition, they're still out there grinding, and I'm like,
yeah,
dude, you need to rest.
yeah,
I've learned this lesson, and it's interesting because I still think it's really hasn't caught on here in the US to the point where it should, but it's like, you know, for one, football, you can't get away with it, right? Football, the stakes are so high, both college and pro, that if you can play, you're going to play.
yeah,
Paying you now, even in the colleges, to play. So
yeah,
you're going to play unless you really, really can't. If you're going to be a detriment to your team, and if you rest up and you're ready for the playoffs, you're good to go. So now that football, there's less quote unquote what I'd say tanking or what's the other, not tanking. Tanking is like losing on purpose, but um, um, what do they call it? Management, pain management, sports man, or is it what's the term?
load management.
Load management. Thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah,
much. That whole idea, right? And
yeah,
immediate picture that popped in my head was Kawhi Leonard. So,
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
my knee hurts. I take 2 months off. I come back for a week, and then I take another month off. Whatever. And
yep,
I understand. Bone on your knee is a terrible thing. So,
yeah,
you look at volume. The one thing that football has going for it is usually one game a week. Every once in a while, you get the Thursday night thing, but then you get 10 days off. So
yeah, yeah,
basketball is a whole nother animal. And then, baseball is just not as intense. Let's face it. You might get
yeah,
some overuse injuries, but you can play 4 or 5 games a week.
yep.
It's not as draining. Whereas you could see, I don't know how hockey players can
Oh God,
smash into each other 2, 3 times a week. It's just like,
yeah,
oh, these guys are crazy. But, the whole idea to me is anyway, the decathletes and heptathletes are kind of by nature that kind of grinder. And you're
yeah.
like, it seems to me when they get to the big meets, they're just held together with baling wire and tape and spit.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I think that's you think about all the different types of stress and strain.
Yeah,
Hurdlers are banged up one way, long jumpers are banged up a different way,
yeah,
vaulters are banged up a different way, and
yep,
distance runners an entirely other way, and throwers another way. And the decathlete is all of them.
right,
They have so like yeah, you're taking impact injury, or maybe not injuries, but you're taking impact when you land in the sand. You're
yes,
taking stress on specific spots when you're hurdling, and then you're
yeah,
taking more in the shoulders when you're vaulting, shot,
sure,
jab, disc.
huh,
It's wild, and I felt that way about triple jump for a long time too. I think it's getting better, but for a long time at the international level, you never saw
yeah.
the same women or men at the top year after year. They could be in the top five, but
So
not
it's
the very
common.
top.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I will try to
it's
steer athletes away from it. I'm unabashedly like a non-triple jumper of all
yeah,
of all the things. I mean, being in track and field all these years, I remember, just coming up through the junior high and high school. I remember doing the 100 and the 200, and I remember, I think I've run the 100 at a meet before. I'm sure I have, but then I've long jumped, I've high jumped, I've pole vaulted. I never have ever liked any kind of distance running. So that was out. But
yeah,
I've messed around and thrown shot and disc. I've tried to throw a javelin. My elbow and javelin do not get along.
okay,
But for the most part, done a little bit of everything, seen how it works and all that. But yeah, the requirements for each one and then, piling it up like you see
Yeah.
on the decathlete is brutal. Oh, so
And there's so many ways to coach it too, which I am just that to me is
Mhm.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
from the way I did it was more or less a partially specialized way of doing it with additional work capacity work
right,
on there. Um, the way our current coach does it, Scott, he does almost a mini, he'll do 3 events in a day, he'll do 4 events in a day, and he'll do that 2 or 3 days a week, and kind of managing load. If we're feeling a little banged up in one spot, we're gonna decrease how much we do in the hurdles or change
right,
the hurdle drills. But he's like, yeah, we're gonna hurdle, high jump, shot, um,
right.
all today. Where I was a little bit different from a logistics standpoint. Is like, well, I'm also coaching the high jump, long jump, triple jump,
Right,
hurdles, sprints. So like kind of wherever our focus is, that's where the multis are moving to.
right.
Um, but then you also have guys, the guy who coached the most recent Canadian gold medalist in the
Mm.
DCAT. He
Oh,
did
I
a
remember that guy.
he ran almost every day. He was
Yeah,
like conditioning running almost every single day with some event on top.
yeah.
Um, it's just
That
it's
would go
such a big.
against the Tony Holler school for sure.
Oh, very much. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
think I don't know. This is my own personal opinion after all these years. Like, I think I took, I'm gonna say 5 years off my competitive career by overtraining easily. I
That's
mean,
yeah.
we easily. I just remember because I heard this now. My Canadian jumper Barb Bachoka, she came down here and trained with me one year and ended up jumping, a career best at 187 and made a travel squad here there. And she's she's my strong right arm. She does a lot of stuff for me and helps me with my website. And shout out to Barb. But
Nice.
she's coming back down here to train. But she was telling me, the thing about this overtraining and tiredness. Like, she came back from a long layoff, and she was just so gung ho. She was like, "I want to do this, I want to do that," and on and on and on. And I was that voice of reason because I've been through all the overtraining. I in high school I always had bad shin splints, but
Yeah,
I don't know what it is about the high jump. It's just fun, so
yeah,
it's more fun than probably the most types of practice. Like, I still don't like running. I'll do it because I know it's important, but I don't just sit out and go, I really feel like running today, because I got to make sure I'm warmed up and I got to do a lot of diligence.
yeah, yeah,
I can jump pretty much right away. I just start the bar low, and you just kind of go easy for a while, and then you're starting to warm up, and you can do that. Sprinting's not like that, not really.
yep,
But the wear and tear. I mean, I had bad shin splints all the time. It was always after a few weeks, and then if I took a week off, you recover fast when you're a kid. But high school, we would jump on Monday, we would jump on Tuesday, Wednesday was a day off, Thursday was a meet, Friday was a light day off. Saturday was usually an invitation on the weekend. And you add that up, that's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. 4 days
jeez,
a week. You
yeah,
know, I didn't think anything about it because that was just the way it was, and it was like, yeah, my shins hurt a little bit. My senior year, I started taking aspirin, woke up one morning spitting up blood, but who cares? My shins weren't hurting on when I needed to jump. And
yeah,
if
yeah,
you give me a day off in between, I was usually okay, and I learned how to get my shins taped. I wish I'd have learned a lot of the knees over toes guy stuff and
sure,
a lot of the shin prevention things that I learned once I got into college. But you do what you do. But
yeah,
even then, I mean, in college, same thing. I trained with Dell Davis, Lee Balkin, and these are two of the great American collegiate high jumpers. Dell jumped 7.7 1/4. Lee jumped 7.6. Lee jumped 7.3 in high school. And yet when we got together, it was like we just jumped. We jumped and jumped and jumped
yep,
all the time. And then if we weren't jumping, we're in the weight room. And if we weren't in the weight room, we're jumping up and down the steps,
yeah, yeah,
to Drake Stadium or to Jan Steps up on the hill towards the library. I mean, I just look back on it and I'm just like amazed. My senior year, I trained so hard because it was my senior year. And these new things called plyometrics came out, and I was doing plyometric boxes and
okay,
tubing pulls into jumps. And I was a white guy that had hops, but I'm like, these are great, and And when you start seeing results from you, like, oh, you're just going to do more. The
Yep.
American idea of if a little is good, then a lot more is even.
More is better. Yep.
I'm just cranking it out and I'm having a great year. And man, it was like I went from a PR, last home meet, PR twice. Next week, we went against SC in the Coliseum. I opened at 7 feet for the first time at 215, made it, made 220, first jumps, boom, boom. I'm fresh. I feel great. And I'm taking jumps at 225. Literally the next week, it felt like I got hit by a car on both knees. Like I just went
Oh,
from feeling great to all of a sudden going, oh man, my knees are killing me. And I went in to see the trainers and they go, you got patellar tendonitis in both of your knees. And I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
here's some anti-inflammatories and you need to rest. And we
Yeah.
literally were 1 week away from Pac-10s and another week away from NC2As.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there going, "Oh, I can't, I can't stop now.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
a great year, and the two biggest meets of the year are coming up.
Yeah.
So I learned the hard way yet again that it's so easy to overtrain. And Lee Balkin, after he left UCLA, jumped 7.6 or 7.7 somewhere, and I was like, "Man, you're having a great year, Lee. What's the difference?" He goes, "You know what, Troy?" He goes, "I I jumped a lot less
Yeah.
when I left and I was an elite, on my own." And I was just like, I remember towards the end of my career, I was jumping technique wise once every 10 days.
Really?
Tops. Yeah, I would do
Okay.
plyos, I would do sprints, I would do other things on other days. But
Yeah.
as far as dragging the mats out and working on takeoff and that kind of stuff, yeah. It worked. It was like,
Yeah.
and I think after a while you've learned about as much about your technique as you can, unless you're going to change everything, which I'm
Yeah.
too old to do. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but so
That's
give us some background. I Go ahead and
yeah.
finish your thought, but I had an idea
Oh,
about.
yeah, it was just such a prescient timing. I've been getting side eye from all my jumpers this week. I actually made him take a week off of competitive jumping.
Mhm.
We came out of the gates hot, and last week I said we're gonna work on some sprinting. We're gonna do a little bit of jumping during the week. We're gonna all go to the meet and run some 60s, run some 200s, maybe 200s, and then
Yeah,
we're gonna cheer on teammates, and we're not gonna get on the runways and jump. Um, and man, I got side eye for that.
yeah,
A lot of hairy eyeballs. And today we got back into it and started jumping again, and everyone's like, "Man, I feel great." I'm like, "You're welcome."
yeah.
That was kind of the
Right.
point. We got championships coming up in a couple weeks, and
Yeah,
we can't go into it banged up. So
yeah.
yeah,
It's
it was
an
just
art form, really. Peaking is part of that. I've been accidentally peaked uh, once, and that was my senior year in high school. When same thing, heavy volumes. And
yeah,
my coaches were smart. So I remember we were getting towards the end of the season and we had the big invitationals that were coming up right before the run to state. So we had Arcadia out here, which is a big meet.
yeah,
And week after that is Mount Sac. Now, Mount
okay,
Sac is not as big for the high schools, it's bigger for college and elites, but it was still a big meet. So those were back to back. But right before Arcadia, there was a week off because of spring break. And my
okay,
coach was like, "Your shins are hamburger. You get the week off." And I was like, "Oh, great." And then, we still that week we had a dual meet on Tuesday that was a makeup that got rained out. We had a Thursday meet, and then Arcadia was on Friday. So even though
okay,
I had a week off, I still had three meets that week. So
yeah,
it was like
yeah, yeah,
got through that mill, and then all of a sudden then we were in for league finals, CIF prelims, CIF finals, masters meet, go to state. There was still a grind after that. So
yeah,
getting through that and having your guys and gals ready to perform at their best is a real art form. And the the encouragement I have to you coaches out there and parents of young athletes and you athletes that are listening to Coach Stone and Coach Haynes here on the Sky High and Fly Jump Lab podcast, Raise the Bar. The thing that I have learned that's huge is, when you hear these horror stories about people, they go, "Yeah, my coach had the big meet coming up. And the night before we ran like 3 miles and we were running the bleachers and everything. I'm like,
Oh,
you were what?
oh,
Like you hear
oh,
you hear stories like that, right? Because you got a young
yeah.
coach and he just doesn't know what the heck they're doing, and they're just like, okay, to get you ready, we're gonna waste it all in the warm up.
Yep, yep, yep.
We're gonna kill you the night before, and you're gonna show up the next day. And I've coined a couple of terms. I don't know if I'm gonna get the same kind of money that Pat Riley gets out of the term three-peat, but I call it razor dull, and that is
Okay.
getting someone and just training them so sharp. You're like, I want you to know all the techniques so well, and you can really impart a lot of knowledge to your athletes, and they can implement it. And you
Yep,
go, you are great. Your knee drive comes up and across. Your hands are high. You do this, you do that, and everything's wonderful. The technique is fantastic. But when it comes to the meet days, they got nothing because you've overtrained the heck out of them. They got
yep,
no juice. Like you're saying, you said we need a week off. We're going to be dead, when we get to the biggest meet. So it's like, yeah, the art form of resting. And the thing I was
yeah,
getting to my senior, which I forgot, I did have the week off, but then at league finals, I strained my hamstring a little bit, and my coach again wisely said, hey, that was on a Friday, just ice it, relax, don't do anything this weekend. Come back next week. We'll just jog and stretch. We did some back overs. I did some
yeah,
real easy approaches, no jumping, no nothing. And then it was literally a week from Friday to Friday. And we had CIF prelims, and I had jumped 6'8" to win league. And the next week I came back with no misses, jumped 6'7", but I felt great. The week off
yeah,
was, and I think it was what I called accidentally done, because my body just said, okay, you're not listening.
yeah, yeah,
Not listening. So we're going to break a little one, and we're
yeah,
going
yeah.
to sideline you for a week. It's like, hamstringing a horse. We're just going to set you down. It'll
Yep,
be good for you in the long run,
yeah,
and you're sitting there going, but I got to train. I got to, it's like,
yeah,
no, you really don't. You don't need to train.
yeah,
You're overtrained. Take a break.
yeah, yeah. That idea of as we get into the big meets, college athletes, I think rightfully are go 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 and want to work hard, and we're rolling into championship weeks. They want to train the hardest. And I'm like, actually, kind of
Yeah.
go the other way. That's
Yeah.
this is will be very intense. Will be very intentional, but the number one thing is feeling good, and
Yeah.
kind of understanding, how do we feel good on that day.
And
Um,
there's underestimated as well as mental fatigue, of a long season. There's a lot to that too. I do admire people that have a little bit of balance in there.
yep.
Because it's easy to say we won't do anything today, but we're still on the track, and then we do mobilities, or we do stomach work, or we do this or that. And it's like, and that has value. I'm not taking away from it. But there
Yeah.
are some times where it's like, hey, like you said, faith's a big deal. Let's take the Lord's Day off
Yeah.
completely. You know,
Yeah.
let let's worship. Let's chill.
Yeah.
And let's recover. God gave us a day of rest for a reason. And it's
Yeah.
like there's a lot of wisdom in that. And that other day during the week or whatever. I mean, taking at least the load off your body, and then
Yeah.
maybe in your mind. But yeah, I want to run this by you, Coach. I just recently I go on these tears, as I
Yeah.
find something that I think is important. So, and I've preached this for years. I've watched great athletes do this for years. I remember being taught this while I was at UCLA in the kinesiology program. First time I remember seeing it was watching the great Dwight Stones, watching him getting ready for his jumps, and he's doing the, boom. You can see him with his counting his steps, and
Hmm.
and he kind of imitate his takeoff a little bit. And I remember the guys going, what is he doing right there? And it was this new thing called visualization,
Yeah.
and I'm watching it going, oh, okay. So he's picturing what he's going to do before he do it. And
Yeah.
then I watch, and of course I remember the great Mark Jackson, who coached the Clippers the Golden State Warriors, and played at St. John's and played in the pros, and he had his routine where he would put his hand up like this, and then you go 1, 2, 3 dribbles, boom. And it was like a career 85 percenter, from the line.
Jeez.
Great free throw
Wow.
shot. And then you watch what do baseball players do right before they're right there, even in between pitches. They're taking their practice swings, and you
Yep.
see golfers, with their warm up routine right before they hit their shot. I mean, the same thing every time.
Yeah.
And one a fascinating study that they did and have replicated many times, blind studies. But I remember at UCLA they taught us about they took a normalized group of 60 people,
Mhm.
volunteers, and they said, okay, we're going to study the effects of training. So they said, the control group, U20, randomly selected, you're over here. We're going to give you a pre-test. You're going to shoot 10 free throws. And then we're going to see how many you make. You're going to come back in 2 weeks and we're going to do it again. Okay, so that's your control group. You didn't do anything to them. Your experimental group one, was you guys shoot and you can practice as much as you want, 2-3 hours a day, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
And the third group, which was a surprise group that nobody knew really what it was about, they told this group, they said, you guys, you take your pretest and then you can practice, but you can only visualize shooting. You can't
Okay.
actually shoot. So they test everybody. They come back, they retest. Control group stays basically the same, which they should in any good scientific study. They took the group that practiced all the time. They got better, which you would expect.
Sure.
It was statistically significant. It wasn't just like one guy and yeah, some of them got better, but some got a lot worse, or vice versa. Some got really just a little bit worse and some got a lot better. But overall, the
Yeah.
averages said they got better. The real interesting kicker was that the group that did not shoot a free throw that next week,
Yeah.
but they practiced in their minds, improved almost as much as the ones that practiced every day.
Yeah.
And so that showed the power of visualization, right? And
Yeah.
that was just one study. It's been replicated in other ways now. So another instance I watched 3 years ago, or whenever the last time that I remember watching the Winter Olympics, and they had, I don't even know the name of the event, but it was one of those ones where they, no ski poles, they just jump and they go down the ramp
Yeah.
and hit the ramp and just spin around like 25 times and twist, and,
Nice.
and then boom, like this.
Yep.
And I remember I had just turned it on. I hadn't seen the whole competition, and they go, typically for me, they go, and here she is. She's the last American. She's the last one that has a hope of winning the gold medal. She's got to do this 25 twists and spins and get a 9.9 from each judge, and she can win. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. I'm in. So I'm watching, and she goes,
Yeah.
she's standing there, and all she's got to do is take a step to her left, and she's going down that ramp and at high speed, right? So
Yeah.
she's standing there and she reaches across her body and she goes like this.
Yeah.
Sure, she reaches across her body and she was like this. Like she does it twice and then jumps out down the ramp. She's spinning around, and right in the middle, I see her go like this and go wham. And she pulls her arm around, comes under the last flip, and lands it perfectly right on the numbers. And I'm
Nice.
just like, give her the gold. I'm like, oh my God. I just watched her practice it twice perfectly
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then nail it, right? And, again, an internal proof that this works.
Yeah.
So, in conjunction with what we were talking about, and this whole idea of peaking and the whole idea of training, the thing that I really wanted to talk against for coaches is training for the sake of training, or
Yep.
training not without a purpose, because everybody wants to get better. But it's like, well, what is the one thing that I was taught as we went along too, was specificity of training, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you want to do things as the season gets narrower in focus. You want to be doing stuff that's very, very similar. Like your lifting should be, I've become a big fan of one-legged lifts. I've
Yeah.
decided,
Yeah.
step ups and lunges and one-legged goblet squats and
Yeah.
one-legged RDLs and everything where you're balancing on one leg. Well, why not two legs? Well, I've never seen anybody jump off both legs in the high jump.
Yep.
They run and they take off one leg.
Yep.
So to be very sports specific, I want to copy those movements
Yeah.
and maybe do those with weights on.
Yeah.
Thought about making these weighted sleeves that they could use to use their arms to make
Yeah.
and
Yep.
sports specificity. So the way I'm tying this together is your athletes are tired, your
Yep.
athletes are overtrained. You still want to get something done, You got a big competition coming up, and you're still trying to do technique.
Yep.
So I have started taking my high jumpers and saying, look, you can do this for 5 minutes a night. And I know they won't because they're going to play video games and watch TV and talk to their friends on their phones.
Yep.
But if you want to spend 5 or 10 minutes of your night reinforcing what we've done in practice, you
Yeah.
can, in the confines of your room, or if you want to go big, go out to the backyard or the garage and just give yourself enough room to take 10 steps, 5 straight, 5 on the curve, but in technique. I said, walk through, perfect. Do your high cycling, do this, visualize dropping into your curve, visualize whatever your gather and jump sequence is. If you're double arm, if you just run off the ground, whatever. But I said, it is your chance to do everything that we have talked about, from cycling your feet during the run to heel toe, your last 2 steps, to driving your knee up and across, to taking your hands and popping them down to your hips and falling back. I said, the only thing you can't do is jump off the ground,
Yep.
and land on your back. Now, if you want to do that, do it on your bed or whatever. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
idea is just to walk through everything. And I said, the advantages that we have are you're moving slow enough to think about all kinds of different technical aspects that you usually can't think about because it all happens too fast. The
Correct.
high jump's one of the shortest events out there. It's 4 or 5 seconds tops
Yep.
from beginning to end, probably shorter than the pole vault, shorter than the long jump or the triple jump. The javelin approach is probably longer for some, so like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a short approach, boom, you're off the ground, it's over. But it's like if you slow it down to a walk, you can get all those aspects done and you have time to think about them as you're doing them instead of them just blowing by you, really, really fast. So
Yeah.
we've been doing a lot of, I wouldn't call it visualization anymore. I would call it quote unquote perfect practice, slow speed walkthrough perfect practice.
Yeah.
And I love the idea because I'm the more I've tried to teach certain technical aspects, the more I think that, the way that we learn things, it's just amazing to me. I've seen people that within 2 or 3 times of doing the high jump, you cannot stop them from leaning back into the bar because they had the bar low, they were pretty tall, and so they were able to do that at low heights. And then as
Yep.
the bar goes up, they keep smacking the bar up with your upper body. And you're like, look, you've got to go up first. As a matter of fact, you should be leaning away from the bar. And they're like, I just lean over here and I go up and over.
And I'm over. Yep.
Yeah. So you're like,
Yeah.
okay, in a way you're right. But the thing, the bar just keeps going up. And eventually you're
Right. Right.
your head on it doing your way. You're gonna have to learn, a change. So
Yeah.
like that's one of my newest things. I've been trying to do that both for teaching technique
Yeah.
and also, today my Vanguard kid was, I'm coach, my hamstrings are pretty tight from yesterday's workout and everything. Okay, well, and we still jumped a little and he was complaining about him. I said, all right, we got to shut this down. Let's just
Sure.
do walkthroughs and
Yeah.
and get that whole thing done. So that's my 2 cent rant for the
Yeah.
day.
Well, I think there's actually been some really solid science out there that says imagining the event happening in terms of your nervous system is the same as doing the event.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of that comes from trauma research, and
Mhm.
that's because people experience trauma and they're kind of investigating, oh, where is this coming from? What's happening to the body? And they say, this is when they re-experience the trauma and you measure things like hormone levels and stress levels and what's happening in essentially internally in the body, they're like,
Right.
it's the same as if it happened.
Yeah.
Um, and then they flipped that on its head and they said, well, what about, can we make this a positive thing? And they're like, yeah, actually, you get now, to a degree, but if you imagine a bench press, you will have nervous system activation in the muscles that you need to bench press.
Right.
Um, you're obviously not going to get the muscular adaptation, but they're like, you could literally, if you had a person who never thought about it and didn't exercise, and a person who did think about it and didn't exercise, the person who did think about it would actually have a stronger bench press.
Wow.
Um, and I did a really interesting study, not study, anecdotal, kind of experiment with my team. Um, Especially with my high jumpers and my hurdlers. They were the two that I worked with the most. Um, from an event standpoint, I find that those two events hit plateaus the hardest.
Yeah.
and tend to, to make the next step takes a little bit of time, a lot of patience.
Yeah.
Uh, Hurdlers will get locked into a rhythm, and it's like you got to change your rhythm. Actually, actively has to change once you hit a certain level of technique expertise. And I find high jumpers too do the same thing that you were just talking about. Well, I always, I do this and I make it over, and it's
Right.
like, well, correct, but we want to make the next bar,
Yes.
not the bar you're already at.
Hmm.
Um, and so we got to work a lot of technique. And one of the things I did is I sat him down and I go, no expectations here, but hurdlers, I want you to sit down, close your eyes, and mentally run a perfect 10 hurdle race. And
Right.
if you hit the hurdle in your mind, or you misstep, or you do something incorrect, go back to the blocks and
Yeah.
do it again. And I was amazed that 15 minutes later, they're like, all right, I finally got one. And you're like, you
Yeah.
mentally had to rehearse that many, like, and I wasn't not out of anger, but just out of
Right. Right.
sheer surprise. They
Yeah.
mentally couldn't do it perfectly.
Right.
It, um, it blew my mind. And
Yeah.
we had, so that was one of those, I think there's a lot to that. I think there's a tremendous amount
Yeah.
involved in the ability to do that. And I think it maybe even says something about their confidence or their
Yes.
knowledge of the
Hmm.
technique. Like, oh yeah, I kept knocking the bar off when I was imagining
Right.
it. Like,
Right.
really? Why would you do that? You know?
Well, now we're touching into sports psychology, and yeah, so negative mindset, negative self-talk, a scatteredness of focus, maybe like
Yep.
ADHD or something, or
Yeah.
yeah, there's who knows? I've even said to my kids, I said I have trouble. You're talking about that exercise, and I'm thinking I'm closing my eyes right now. And I'm going, can I picture? I should. I mean, I've watched thousands and thousands of videos. I should be able to play one back in
Yeah.
my head and do that, and it's like, and I tell the kids, I said, the problem with me visualizing what I did is I don't have any video. Like I'm
Right,
so
right.
old. I'm like dinosaur video. I haven't even found any VCR tapes. And I said, if I did, I wouldn't have anything to play them on. So all that stuff is gone. I've got stuff
Yeah.
jumping last week, but I'm 61 years old. So I'm like, that doesn't really
Right.
help. But
Yeah.
yeah, that I love that, man. That the idea, I think I need to get back to that. I need to lay the ground roots of both. Because I can picture, the reason for the visualization, but then there's the positive aspect too, because I found the same thing. I'm
Yeah.
saying, hey, slow it down
Yeah.
to, because I had I do have a great mentor golf swing guy that I went to. I was a 12 handicap, and I started seeing Mike McNary. He's out here in Costa Mesa Country Club in California, and he's a really awesome coach. And he was a Mac O'Grady disciple, if you know that name. Mac O'Grady
Oh
uh,
no.
shot it was in the on the tour, PGA tour for years. And everybody just said sweet swinging Mac. He was just like this
Okay.
unbelievable technician, just great swing. Couldn't putt, so he never really won that much, but he was an
Okay.
outrageous ball striker, right? He just
Yeah.
and the guy has like 20 volumes. I've seen Mike's volumes like this thick of biomechanical positions and analyses and swing speeds, and it's just all this amazing stuff. And Mike's mind has taken all that and just put it together and kicked it out another way. But in essence, he came down to me one time. He said, look, if you can't do it slow, you can't do it fast.
Yep.
You can't. So I mean, he would literally, I'd be holding my club, and I'll show you my hands like this, and he would say, I
Yeah.
want you to cock your wrists here and
Yeah.
put the club parallel, and then swing up to parallel with your arms, like this, and then
Yep.
with your arms parallel, then swing. And I would, when I first started, I'd cock my wrists. I go, okay, I got that. Come up to here, yeah, and then you go swing, and I'd be like, I can't just swing. I would cheat. I would
Yeah.
pull back and try to swing. And he's like, no,
Yeah.
no, no, because as soon as you introduce momentum into the system, if you make a mistake, it gets magnified by how fast you're moving. It's like
Yep.
if you're slightly off balance and you're moving at high speed, you're going to fall over. So I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. So I started to take that and move that thought process to my jumpers. And I'm like, well, one of the things that I always understood as a jumper was that it's much easier to hit vertical at slow speeds. If I'm
Okay.
just standing there, I put my foot out and I say, I want to jump up and touch the rim. I jump up and touch the rim. I'm not going
Yep.
to move because I'm not moving. I can very easily go straight up. But when you're running at high speed and you say, I want to go straight up, man, you better lean back and compensate. You better do some other things. You better drive your
Yeah.
knee, a certain direction, or you're going to go way under, and pass.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to be able to do it. As I said, and like I said, just what you said, I'm like, okay, here, walk through. And I show them. I go, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, gather and knee up and across. Leave your knee, leave your hands up. Your knee turns you back to the bar. Start to fall, bend this leg, and then bam, pop your position. And I did it 2 or 3 times, really,
Yeah.
really slowly. And right away, they're looking at you, they're listening. Maybe that's this generation again. And then they start jogging. I'm like, no, 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 stop, stop,
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
This isn't a half approach. It's not, you're not running. What did I just do? I walked it. I want you to walk it perfectly
Yep.
in technique. And it's like they'll 5, 6 times in a row, the knee didn't come across, or whatever it was we were talking about. I said, let's remember, I've broken the high jump into 5 phases: straight, curve, takeoff, flight, and layout. I go, so as you're going along, I said, the only thing we're not going to be able to do is fly, you know,
Yeah.
so you're not going to actually leave the ground, but then you can actually hit your layout position to a point. So I'm like, I want
Yeah.
to lay that groundwork. And it's interesting, like you said, to get the different levels of success, even on a walkthrough at slow,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think you even find out, what an athlete is doing, thinking, or targeting with that. You'll have them walking or moving really slow, and it's like, hey, what are you looking at? And
Yeah,
all of a sudden it's, well, I was looking at that bug on the wall, kind of thing. And it's
right.
like, well, no, we got to focus on our specific spot.
Yeah,
What are we targeting typically? And
yeah,
um, asking the questions. I had this today. I got a young lady who can't find a long jump board at the moment. And I said, where are you trying to put your foot? She's like, well, I'm not trying to put my foot anywhere. I'm like, oh, well, okay, well, we're behind the board all the time. I want you to do this. Just try to put the front two spikes of your shoe right on the scratch line, and let's see what happens. And next thing you know, she's on the board. And it was just one of those, like, we slowed it down, we talked through it, and then all of a sudden the question of, hey, what are you looking at, or what are you
yeah,
trying to do here, came out. And all of a sudden, we're having this much more informative conversation because
yeah,
it's, oh man, I guess I assumed you knew
yeah,
to try to do this, and you're just, no, just kind of run and hope. And I'm like, ah,
yeah.
well, let's not do that anymore. But
Yeah, yeah. That's another one of my favorite topics is talking about stride length and stride rate.
oh my
Because,
gosh,
when you're going, how do you attack that first hurdle? How do you
yeah,
get, from the start to the end in the high jump? You
yep,
get these people that are running along relatively either power boundy or even cycling. And all of a sudden when they get on the curve, they just start chopping their feet, like this. And I'm like, no, 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 no.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
I go, you might feel like you're running faster, but you're moving your limbs fast, but you're not moving any faster. Your stride length has dropped so much that it doesn't matter how quick you are there. You're actually losing speed.
yeah,
They just they don't have that sense, of whatever it is that takes. For me, it was always, I remember that was one of the first things I learned in kinesiology was that formula. And it made
yep,
sense to me. And I started realizing like, cycling for high jumpers to me is huge. It's like, look, I need you taller. So if you pick your knees up and you cycle your feet as you run, your feet in recovery are kicking you in the butt, then your center mass is higher. And I tell them, you're going to be more efficient. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to feel like you're not running as fast because your strides are longer and you're not going to have to take as many of them.
yep.
That to a person, they're always like, I don't feel like I'm going that fast. I said, I really want these. This guy came out to my camp just 2 years
Yeah.
ago, and he had this vest with a little sensor in it, and they have that thing where they can load it up to a GPS and they
Oh
can
yeah, yeah, yeah,
track you, right? And they can give you
yeah,
exact numbers of your speed and your accelerations and everything. And that is something that I wished I'd have had, because it was like 5 or 10 grand. But I'm to the
Yeah.
point where
Yeah.
I'm like, I would love to have that feedback. My ideal high jump place is to have a camera down each shot, straight down the bar, maybe
Yep.
5 degrees out, right, on both sides, and then
Yeah.
one camera straight at the standards, so I can see the lean back angle. And the lean back is not the same as the lean to the left or the right, so that's why I got the other two cameras.
Yep.
And I'm like, I want to have an overhead camera so I can watch the curve,
Yeah.
and then I want force plates underneath
Yeah.
the takeoff. I'm
Yep.
like, you give me all that, and you give me some ground time, like how much time they spend on the ground, how much
Yeah.
force being produced, what speed they're moving at, and then give me the visual of how they're hitting, and so I can see the exact technique. Now we got something. But that's me.
Yeah.
I'm a super overly technical guy. I got to catch myself sometimes, because I get into this. I can get into the box of, you got to do this. You got to do it this way. And there's times when I'll be like, okay, wait, this is just not working with this kid.
Yeah.
There's always going to be the kid that's just either a different side of their brain is active, or they're just not technicians, and they're like feel and touch and, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
smell. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to relate to you here. What are you thinking about? Like you're saying, what do you think about when you
Oh
jump?
man.
What are you looking at? Because sometimes it comes back to you, and like, man, that is just like, I must be sounding like I'm talking another language, you know,
Yeah.
to this kid. So there's
Yeah.
always something to learn out there.
Yeah, I think, that was probably my biggest a paradigm shift as a coach was when, it might have been Dan Paff, Stu McMillan, someone who said, you haven't taught until they've learned. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't, the first time I heard that, I was like, I don't think I like how I feel about this, because I'm
Right.
pretty sure I thought I was teaching, and I think a lot of kids weren't learning.
Yeah.
Um, and it turned into that became this that's kind of the guiding force for me right now is, you got a kid doing one thing, and it's like, all right, are you actually learning what we're doing? And I got a high jumper right now. Kids, he's I think I've had two, maybe three aliens in my life who are just super different. Um, and he's one of them. And I haven't even had him touch a weight yet. He's a long triple and high, and we're really navigating. He's never been taught anything technically,
Right.
um, and he has really poor PRs to be frank. But when he hits one in practice, he's going from, I think he jumped like 5'7" in high school, maybe
Yeah.
5'9", and I'm like, there's zero reason for that. The kid jumped like 12 feet something in a broad jump on just a random day.
Yeah.
Um, and he's had moments of brilliance where he'll hit one, and I'll be like, that was a 2 meter jump on a 3 or 4 step. This is crazy. Um, but he is my biggest project of, we're trying to teach him the long, the triple, and the high, and I really have just abandoned long entirely. Because I'm like, if you can bounce and sprint, we're fine. But when it comes to high jump, so much of what we're doing is just, hey, I want you to do this. I want you to lean starting on this step,
Yeah.
and then he runs his run. I'm like, okay, now what did you try to do there? How did you try to do it? And he gets so frustrated. He's like, Coach, just let me jump. And I'm like, I would love to. However, I gotta know, when I told you to lean,
Yeah.
I didn't see what I was looking for, and I need to know where the disconnect is. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, I turned my head. I'm like, all right, that's what you're trying to do. Okay, here's what I need you to do.
Yeah.
It was just, that was one of the biggest paradigm shifts, was just understanding that you really haven't gotten the job done until they know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I'm telling kids like, hey, 0.18 ground contact time here or less. And they're
Yeah.
like, sure, coach. Um, I'm like, did that feel fast? And they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, coach. So,
Right.
and I'm
And
like,
even with the numbers, it still might not mean anything, right? If you had the
yeah,
technology behind you. Yeah.
yeah,
And that rather famously wrapped it up for us last night, as I was finishing up the podcast with Coach David Stone from Elmhurst University in Illinois. He said it's 25 miles west of Chicago. Um, my power on my computer went out. I could have sworn I had it hooked up and it just drained the whole time and just boom, no warning signals, nothing. So that's gonna wrap it up. I talked with David on the phone afterwards, and we're gonna definitely do this again. Had a great time talking with Coach Stone, and still had a lot of questions to ask. I still don't even know. I believe he said I know he said he was a distance coach first, so I'm assuming that he was a distance runner. I don't know if he did the jumps as well, or trifled in them or something, and then picked them up later. So there's a lot more that we can learn about Coach Stone and what he's doing. Follow us here on the Raise the Bar podcast. We're on Spotify. We're on the YouTube channel. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're looking for other platforms. So if you enjoy the content, go ahead and subscribe, and you will hear me jawing with coaches, athletes, trainers, physical therapists, sports psychologists, nutritionists, anybody who is going to help us raise the bar higher in our coaching, our competing, our training, everything. So until next time. Oh, and check out the recent podcast I did with Elena Kulachenko, originally of the Soviet Union and now from representing the country of Cyprus in this last Olympics. But she's still in college. She's going to be at the University of Georgia. Should be competing here in the indoor nationals here, NC2As, and that podcast is out. So take a listen to that, and we'll keep the content coming your way. Until next time, it's Troy Haynes of Sky High and Fly Jump Lab and Raise the Bar, signing off.